Welcome, everyone, to another True Tales of Terror. Today's tale, number 10, is called Extra Layers. It takes place quite some time ago, in the early 1990s. With all the strangeness in our realm as of late, I feel like it is time to tell this tale once and for all. There has been a lot of talk online lately about shifting realities or glitches in the Matrix. It would seem that this phenomenon is happening with more frequency, or are people just paying more attention? I can confirm that this was happening long before the term Mandela effect was even considered to describe the strange events and occurrences. We all know about the obvious examples: Berenstein and Berenstain, the Fruit of the Loom cornucopia, and many others that we collectively remember one way, only to be told, no, there wasn't a cornucopia, when we all know that there was. A lot of people believe CERN is the cause. It's LHC, or Large Hadron Collider, going live on September 10th, 2008. And reports of strange occurrences seem to coincide with that date. Knowing CERN's LHC didn't go live until 2008, I thought my experience was unrelated, taking place in the early 90s. That was at least until I looked into the origin of CERN and its research, development, and applied applications began much earlier. Coming into existence shortly after the Second World War in 1949, CERN's first accelerator went online in 1957. The synchrocyclotron provided experiments in particle studies and nuclear physics. In 1964, they unleashed the more powerful proton synchrotron. This means CERN has been operating our entire lives. The study of nuclear physics and proton advancements has its benefits, and we have all enjoyed our constantly advancing technology, but at what cost? Knowledge is power, but power does not equal knowledge. Some doors shouldn't be opened, like Pandora's box. Once you do, it cannot be closed. It's easy to dismiss a book title or an underwear brand's logo. Not so much when it's entire houses or towns. Here is the story as I received it, told in first person. I remember the day well, summer vacation of 1992. I was at the age where toys no longer held much interest, and not quite at the age of chasing girls around yet. So I did what I always did back then, and headed off into the woods to explore. My family owned a large piece of land, and it was mostly cleared. It had some wooded areas, and sat next to a large swaths of state forest. One of my favorite things to do was follow the river that ran the edge of the property line and see what laid beyond. I had already made several journeys up this way over the summer break, each time going a little further up, exploring the area a little more each time. I had located some amazing finds on these journeys, like hidden parts of the river with swimming holes, a few small caves in the limestone-rich area, and odd anomalous plants and animals. The last time I had trailblazed roughly a mile from my family's land, finding all manner of wilderness. I always made sure to take a machete and supplies in a backpack. I kept a small notebook and would map it out as I went, while maintaining a log of the journey. I started the day early, excited to go explore the woods. I ate a quick breakfast and packed my bag. Bottle of water and some snacks, small tackle box with a collapsible mini pole, and a folding buck knife and a compass. I shouldered the bag and picked up the sheathed machete, setting off out the back of the house. I headed up the small path through the lilacs at the back of the yard. Followed it up to the top of the hill, a big open field surrounded by forest. A path continued around and down the back. Quickly swallowed up by the forest, I followed it down and headed into the woods. Using the path I had made in prior journeys, I threaded it like a needle as it pushed further into the forest. On the right, a thick patch of trees and thick briar bushes. The left side followed the edge of a massive ravine with a river at the bottom. Usually around 80 feet from the bottom, at times it rose to well over 150 to 200 feet. The path followed tight to the edge, and at its highest you couldn't help but look down at the river as it roared by at the bottom. The gorge at the bottom being the openmost area, surrounded on all sides by nothing but thick forest. There was a tree close to the very edge of the river's highest point, which was a stone overhang 200 foot straight down to the river. You could hold on to the tree and lean enough to safely peer over the edge and down into the gorge. Past this point was the much less explored area. The path twisted away from the edge of the gorge and into very thick forest. There was a small trail winding into the woods. I pushed on, unsheathing my machete and hacking branches and shrubs as needed, clearing the way. The path made its way down and twisted through and around big trees. As the trail brought you down, the gorge all but disappeared and the trail was flat through this area. River still on the left, but nearly flush with the trail. And on the right, a massive ridge ran its length through the thick forest. I stopped for a moment, taking a few sips of water, taking in the natural beauty of the woods. The river roared, birds chirped and sang bird song, the occasional squirrel or rabbit darting off into the thickets that surrounded the trail. Standing there, I couldn't help but notice the trees in this location were so tall it was mind-boggling. Some were pretty sizable, but most were only about a foot in diameter, and yet they seemed to extend hundreds of feet into the air, matching the tree's height on the surrounding ridges. I wanted to get a better view and left the trail, breaking right and cutting a new path off the trail and up the ridge. I reached the bottom of the ridge and began climbing the steep incline. Loose rocks rolled down as I climbed higher through the loose dirt and vegetation. I stopped for a moment about halfway up and noted the newly made path on my improvised map I had drawn up. Putting it back in my backpack, I continued climbing the ridge. It became increasingly steep and difficult to traverse. I held on to anything I could as I slowly proceeded up the steep incline. Almost at the top, the last stretch was so steep I had to crawl slowly, placing my feet on the loose dirt, rocks, and leaves, grabbing small plants and trees to maintain my position. A large piece of earth crumbled under my feet and rushed down the makeshift path I was making. I had almost slipped with the last breakaway, and my adrenaline rushed through my body. Grabbing at anything I could, I pushed on and finally crested the steep ridge line. I looked over the edge of the path I had just climbed and saw that indeed all the trees below were absurdly tall. I moved away from the edge, glad I hadn't fallen, and remarking to myself how strange the trees were. Already being off trail and at the top of a massive ridge deep in the woods, I decided to push further, taking a moment to add this new improvised trail to my map. Looking into the woods, I noticed how bright it was ahead, and thought there must be a large clearing up ahead. I moved forward through the very thick forest, and suddenly I stepped out into a particularly flat clearing. Standing there perplexed at the sight, I saw 9 identical houses arranged in a 3x3. They formed a perfect grid, and the field was totally surrounded by forest. Each house had a driveway, and a road connected each house. But it went nowhere. This wasn't supposed to be here, I thought to myself, and slowly approached one of the strange houses. I walked up to one of the windows and looked inside. The grass was perfectly mowed around these houses, and they all looked brand new. Through the window I could see it was fully furnished and even had paintings and houseplants. It was very odd, and a strange feeling washed over me. I went to the next house and looked through the same window as the previous, and it contained the exact same furnishings. Even the paintings were identical. No way, I thought to myself, and walked to the next house, same color as the last 2, and looked through the same window, and everything was identical to the last 2. I stepped away from the 3rd house and started walking along the edge of the woods. I went all the way around. A small road encircled the houses, and they all connected to it. But it went nowhere, just around the houses. I walked left behind one of the houses, wanting to leave, but still curious. I walked to the center of the grid the roads had made, shaped like a large pound sign or a hashtag. I walked up to the house that sat at the very middle, looked through the window, and saw everything was identical to the other houses. The only thing missing was people, pets, or even wild animals seemed to avoid this place. I walked to the house's front door and rang its doorbell. A hollow ding-dong could be heard, shattering the odd silence. Nothing. I knocked on the door, and it creaked open. Standing there at the threshold, I called out, "Hello? Anybody home?" Nothing. The silence seemed to increase, if that was even possible. I closed the door and made my way back to where I had entered this strange place. There were 9 houses in total, forming rows of 3. Every house was identical right down to the smallest detail. The road that connected them all literally went nowhere, but completely surrounded all the houses, and itself surrounded by thick forest. I couldn't get my mind around why this was here, or why it felt so weird, but every fiber of my being was telling me to leave. Why would there be these perfectly decorated houses up here in the woods? Why was there no way to leave or get in? Where were the people? It was strangely quiet, and hardly a sound could be heard. Even the birds and insects seemed to just stop in this entire area. How could this be? Who was maintaining these yards? It all seemed so odd. I expected a homeowner or somebody to appear at any moment, and yet nobody did. And I couldn't shake the feeling of strangeness and could feel eyes upon me. I slipped back into the woods and down the steep incline I had climbed to enter, followed the trail back home and called one of my friends. I told him about the strange houses I found, and we decided to go see it again. My friend came along and we retraced the steps back on the trail through the woods and up the massive embankment. "Get ready for this," I said as we crested the hill. We both stepped out of the woods and into the field I had found the houses in just a few hours ago. But to my amazement, there was nothing there. No houses, no roads, just an open, empty field. My buddy looked at me annoyed. "Well, what's so strange that we hiked all the way up here?" he asked. "Where are the houses?" I couldn't believe my eyes. How could it all just vanish? I actually touched the houses, felt the wood, the door handle. I heard the doorbell ring. We both turned and left and never spoke of it again. And I know what I saw. And while I can't explain it, I knew it was just as real as you and I. I've never been able to explain what it was I saw that day. And while houses are just a normal thing, these were definitely not normal. This place, it was so strange. The feeling that it gave was just hard to even put to words. But I know what I saw, and I remember being there. Well, everyone, thanks for watching. And that concludes number 10, Extra Layers. We'll see you next time. Be safe out there. Take care.